My name's Stephanie. I work for Climbing the Seven Summits. I also want to give a huge thank you to Brian and Caroline, who are joining us as our co-hosts today. So, as we do introductions, what we're going to also do is have you guys peek over our agenda. Lots of things to cover, from the itinerary to what our Everest Base Camp actually looks like, to common questions, to altitude sickness, and how we manage that, and our suggestions and tips. But let's go ahead and jump into introductions. Brian Meyer is joining us from sunny Florida. He almost did what, a sand and surf background. We thought about
I was
it.
getting to my beach background, but I thought mountains,
Yeah,
specifically these mountains, would be much more appropriate.
I love it. So Brian has been a client of ours and actually joined us, I believe it was 2 years ago on the trek. So I'm going to let Brian go ahead and introduce himself, and then we'll jump over to Caroline. Brian, the floor is all yours.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, my name is Brian Meyer, and I was a client of CTSS last spring. I did the rugged luxury trip last April. It was absolutely amazing. My background is just had a career in business. I used to run a meeting and events company, which I had fortunately sold late in 2022, which allowed me the bandwidth to go and do this trip and a few other trips also. And now I do consultative work in the finance field. My whole life, I've been interested in long distance cycling, long distance hiking and backpacking, and adventure travel in general. So my whole life, I've always tried to put in one or two trips like that every year. And this was kind of the best of the best, so to speak.
Beautiful. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and your real life testimony today. We're going to be tapping into his knowledge and his experiences on the trail and on the trek with us. And then, last but not least, joining us today is our co-owner, Caroline Pemberton, and she is going to be doing a lot of the sharing today. Rugged Luxury is something that she helped create for us, and it's quite incredible. Caroline's going to have some more time to talk about her story, but Caroline, give us a quick introduction before you jump into what is rugged luxury.
Yeah, sure. So I never expected to be running a mountaineering expedition company and trekking company. I had a love of adventure since a really young age. I'm an import, I'm an Aussie, but I now live up in the mountains in California. And I actually had a TV career for 15 years. So very, very different before I started climbing Seven Summits with my husband, who most people kind of know. He's a bit of a well-known name in the mountain space, my camel. And I think for me, like Rugged Luxury was born and the Everest Base Camp Trek and Stay was born because the most transformational place that I've ever been is Nepal. So I'm going to share a little bit about that.
I think it's so neat, Caroline, how the mountains really bring us all together. Brian comes from finance, you come from TV. Folks, I'm a former teacher. Here we all are to talk about the mountains. So, Caroline, I'm going to pass this over to you to kind of go through these first few slides with us.
Yeah, so obviously we run a mountain guiding company, and that company goes from Everest Base Camp treks to the summit of Everest. And one of the coolest parts about our job is just seeing how the mountains, as you said, they bring us together and how they have the power to transform people. Being part of people's dreams, facilitating people's journeys is really powerful and incredible. And you learn a lot because in a fast-paced modern world, it's hard to find places that really humble people and really challenge them. And when people get out of their comfort zones and they get challenged and then they triumph, we really see how that transforms people into the best versions of themselves. So that's a really incredible, powerful thing to be part of. But these journeys that we craft have such different, ways that they change people's lives. And like when we say, oh, it can change your life, it really does and can. And that was really true for me. In many ways, the Everest Base Camp trek was the most pivotal moment of my life. It was a sliding doors moment. And I can trace literally my career, my love life, my everything, my family back to Everest. So it all began when I was just 19 and I just finished high school. And my brother Rex, who's just there in the left in the blue cap, he sat down at family dinner table, age 20, and he said, I'm going to be the youngest Australian to climb Mount Everest. Now, this was a guy had no experience, no mountaineering background in our family whatsoever. There are no mountains in Australia, if you didn't know. And it was just this dream. And I was his young sidekick sister, and amazingly, he put the pieces of the puzzle together to make it happen for himself. And I thought, well, I've just finished school. I'm taking a year between school and university. I'm going to go with him and be his Everest Base Camp manager. And so Everest became my home for 6 weeks. And it was the most formative 6 weeks of my life. Very fortunately, after a very tough season on the 31st of May, 2005, so a long time ago, my brother summited and stood on top, and he radioed me from the top of the world. And I remember him just saying to me, you know, it's not the summit that I'm on. It's not the goal that I've achieved that I'm focusing on right now. It's all the other mountains out there waiting to be climbed. And it just stuck with me my whole entire life as kind of a North Star. Like, we reach these goals and then what's coming next. And then on the right, you'll see a little guy on the summit with a picture, a little sign. My love life was also written in Nepal, my love story. On the same expedition, there was this young, hot, ruggedly handsome mountain guide, Mike Hamill. He was now a 6 times Everest summiteer. He's lapped the 7 summits 7 times. He wrote the famed guidebook, Climbing the 7 Summits, and he's the other owner of the business. And I met him as a 19-year-old on that mountain. We lost touch for 10 years. We kind of cut sporadic contact, but then rekindled the relationship, and he asked me to marry him on top of the world. And then Climbing the 7 Summits was born. And together we've built it into the gold standard of an industry leader in Everest summit climbs and treks. And like our name says, it's Climbing the 7 Summits, the highest mountain on every continent. We run trips all over the world, and probably the expedition that we're most proud of is, you know, Everest summit climbs and the rugged luxury trek and stay. So super exciting to be able to introduce you guys to that. So what is rugged luxury? People always ask. That's the first question they ask because the name is so unique. Essentially, it's meaningful, small group, exclusive expeditions that are all about guaranteeing a great adventure. This is an expedition, not just a travel trip, but it's also about how do we enhance this experience and reward you with a comfy bed at the end of the day. It's about being in touch with people and places, but having the highest quality logistics to kind of create a sense of luxury in really far-flung, remote, tricky places like Everest Base Camp. We're going to be launching Kilimanjaro, Machu Picchu. So it's really about a marriage between being able to have experiential travel, rugged adventure with real, raw, gritty, up-close experience stuff at its finest, but with the creature comforts that make it just so much nicer. We just found that, like, as luxury travelers, it kind of divided, right? Like, you can either have adventure or you can be in a beautiful hotel somewhere in the world with every amenity and luxury, but sometimes those two things just don't cross over and you get insulated. If you're sitting here in this beautiful hotel, you get insulated from the real experience of the place, of the people. And to me, that's why we travel in the first place, you know, the thrill of an adventure. So we really wanted to marry them together, which is what rugged luxury is. And where we do that the best is Everest Base Camp.
Awesome. So Caroline, I think we're going to have you go ahead and talk a little bit more about what sets us apart and what puts us in a position to create a really unique product. There are Everest Base Camp treks and treks all the way up there by all sorts of different operators, but there's something that sets us apart a little bit differently. And I want you to go ahead and share a little bit about our operation on Everest Base Camp.
Yeah, so basically, it wasn't born from the idea that, like, we were just going to create the best-in-class luxury Everest Base Camp expedition. It came about really organically. Like, obviously, we are primarily a high-altitude mountaineering guide service. We run Everest summit climbs and teams every single year, and we're really good at them. Just, you know, blowing my own trumpet. But why we're really good at them and why we've had really unparalleled and consistent success is the secret sauce, which makes up rugged luxury, right? So the secret sauce to summit success was well-rested, happy, healthy, stoked climbers. So we realized that if people are well-fed, sleeping well, like, they perform really well, just like any athlete anywhere in the world. And people would call us really soft. They'd be like, oh, why have you got such nice tents at base camp? But we knew how strategic it was, 1% here, 1% there, having a great chef, having fantastic accommodations at base camp. You know, the Everest summit climb is 6 weeks long. You're up there for 6 weeks. So we would just invest all this money in these rugged luxuries to optimize everyone's experience. And we saw this incredible amount of success. And people were not only successful and safe, they were also really happy. And they got so much more out of their experience. It really optimized their experience. So when we looked at our Everest Base Camp product, we were like, well, we've got all these amazing amenities for our summit team. How can Everest trekkers also have that optimized experience? How can they be the beneficiaries of that? And that's how rugged luxury was born. You know, I think there's so much canned travel, so much mass produced, like too fast, too many people, too much like strictness on itineraries that you lose quality, and we're the antithesis of that. The other thing is we're a mountain guiding service, right? Like if anyone understands like high altitude and how that works on the body and how to help safeguard people, keep people safe, keep people successful, it's us. We're not a run-of-the-mill trek operator with, trek guides that have no idea about how high altitude affects the body. We put the same logistics, the same expertise as we do our summit climbs into this trek. So I think that's one of the cool things. I think the biggest other one that we'll go into is if you check out the middle photo on the deck, you'll see, there's a rock, and it was replaced this year by a sign, but I think the sign fell down. But there's a rock that's very famous up there called Everest Base Camp rock. And it's literally that. It's a spray painted rock. And once you reach, that's where 99% of people turn around and they go back down to the nearest village. And Everest Base Camp is not anywhere near that rock. If you look into the background of that photo, you'll see almost like a frozen waterfall coming down in the middle of the photo. And just imagine all the tents set up there. And that's a 40-minute walk from that rock onto that glacier. That's where Everest Base Camp is. So most people never reach Everest Base Camp proper. You have to be associated with an Everest Summit team and permitted that way, and be a well-wisher of an Everest Summit team to be able to access Everest Base Camp proper. And so with us, you have that golden ticket and you can come all the way in, which is really exciting. So I think that's, for me, what our biggest difference is. But Brian, like from a client's perspective, from someone who did this trek, what do you feel like the key difference was traveling with Climbing the Seven Summits CTSS was for you? What was the key difference of rugged luxury?
I mean, a lot of what you said, my experience was amazing. And so for anybody out there that has to travel really far just to get to Nepal, which is probably just about everybody, I'm in the East Coast US. So it's like a 24-hour trip. You change planes in Doha and you finally get to Nepal. And I've been on a lot of other trips. In this particular trip, I was going solo. And to walk off the airplane and see a friendly face waiting for you there in Nepal after 24 hours of travel to get there was just amazing. That's never happened before. So immediately I walked off the airplane and there was the difference with one of the CTSS team members standing with my name with a sign on it. And Nepal's a little different. It's a little bit chaotic. There's people all over the place. And to have your guide there waiting for you to walk off the flight. So you hop in a cab that's waiting for you. They help with all your luggage because you have a ton of stuff because you're going on this big trek and you're going for a long time. And then you're off to a really, really nice hotel to meet the rest of your fellow climbers and trekkers and guides and team members. An amazing hotel in the middle of Kathmandu was a huge difference. So you knew right off the bat you're in store for something really, really special.
That's awesome, Brian. Thank you for sharing that. And so your take, when you got to this rock, did you take a picture there?
Yeah, so 15 days later after landing, or 16 days, because you spend a couple days there in Kathmandu, and then you're off to Lukla, and then you begin your trek. So yeah, I did get a photo at that rock, and a lot of people happened to be at that rock, but only a few of us that day that got a picture of that rock continued on to actual base camp for a couple of days. So I do have that photo. Then after the rock, where nobody else could go, I have many, many other photos also along the way, including dozens and dozens staying overnight at base camp.
That's wonderful. So folks, over the course of today, you're going to hear us continuing to reference going beyond this rock. And so that's kind of an important marker. And then I hope that we'll continue to paint a picture of all the differences that Caroline was mentioning and Brian has just kind of started to bring up. So we're going to kind of hopefully lay those out. To kick things off, we do have a short video that we're going to play that actually Caroline, you'll hear her voice on it. So it's almost like she's presenting it in real life, but it's a wonderful video that actually is going to take you to Everest Base Camp and show you what it looks like there and what our setup looks like. It takes it out of this idea and just photos into a real dynamic look and feel.
Trekking to Everest Base Camp is on everybody's bucket list. Well, at least it should be. But here's how most people do it. Conga line of tourists, grimy tea houses, move too fast, get altitude sick, feel crappy. Only some of the team reach a random spray-painted rock on the very outskirts of camp, take a selfie and leave, retrace your steps for 40 miles. Here's how rugged luxury does Everest Base Camp. 5-star hotels in Kathmandu. Luxury mountain lodges. An Everest summit guide as your expedition leader. A slow acclimatization schedule. A focus on safety. Tented camps under alpine stars. And when we reach our goal, we don't take a photo at a rock. We go through the gates with exclusive access to Everest Base Camp proper, where only the summiteers stay. We spend 2 nights sleeping in luxury heated personal geodesic dome tents. We eat gourmet chef-prepared meals on the glacier, go ice climbing at the base of the world's tallest peak, relax in the famous big house drinking cappuccinos, playing ping pong, and unwinding with the world's highest massage in the spa tent. And when we're done, a helicopter lands on the glacier to whisk us away through Himalayan giants and secret valleys all the way back to Kathmandu. We celebrate with the sights, sounds and colour of the city and an incredible farewell dinner. We leave changed, inspired and humbled. We are travellers, not tourists. This is Rugged Luxury. So, I think the Everest Base Camp, obviously it was really pivotal in my life. It really changed my life, changed the direction of my life. And that was partly because of the place. This is a bucket list pilgrimage. This is the most famous trek in the world for a really good reason, because it's still off the beaten track. It's still remote. It's the perfect blend of nature and culture and adventure and being in amongst the Himalayan giants, like walking up that valley and seeing Everest and Lhotse and Ama Dablam. Like, these are huge peaks and you cannot help but feel really humble and small. And it's like going back in time. The nearest road is like 100 kilometers away. There's no cars, there's no roads, there's everything that you see around you, from the tea houses to Everest Base Camp. Everything is hand carried or yak carried or helicoptered in. So it's like going back in time. There is this real immersion here, and it's a really authentic place. And it's great. I think it's just great getting back to basics, like you're on the trail, as Brian, you'll probably tell us, like you're on the trail and all you think about is like, okay, well, when's my next meal? And everything just goes simple, and it's such a relief and it's so nice. So it's not a long trek. We'll go into that in a little bit, but it's only 40 miles, 65 kilometers. It does take a little while because of the altitude. You reach up to 17,500 feet, 5,300 meters. We run it in the springtime, in the Himalayan spring, which is April, May timeframe. We meet early March. Kathmandu is where we come together. The biggest difference, I think, is just having that. Most people have the goal of reaching Everest Base Camp, but being able to actually reach Everest Base Camp proper and then immerse yourself there and spend time there. And then Rugged Luxury, we are the finest luxury Everest Base Camp trek in the world. You can't do this with anybody else, and it's basically our summit logistics and amenities that allow us to do it. So it is a very, very special thing.
Awesome. And one of the things that we have written at the very bottom, and you've kind of started to see a little bit of this, of course, we have all these beautiful dome tents, and you get to go to the real base camp, and you saw them spraying champagne. But it's the people, and it's those wonderful guides. It's people like Brian. It's all the trekkers. It's everyone that's out there. But we want to talk a little bit about our guides and who we bring along to help show all these groups and escort and trek and guide and lead everyone up the mountain to Everest Base Camp. So Caroline, I know that you're going to talk a little bit about our guides and who we choose, but I know, Brian, this is you in this photo with Big Tendi here. Do you want to tell us a little bit, before Caroline jumps in, how it was hiking with Big Tendi? This is a quote about Big Tendi right here, and just kind of your experience with our guide for this trek.
Yeah, my guide, as you can see, I'm right there standing next to Big Tendi, and he was absolutely like an amazing figure in person to be around. We were together like 14 days, and it started off in Kathmandu. He went over our trip with us, met with us. We all went to Lukla together, and then off we went that week. And so his knowledge and experience in that region of the country is just amazing. The first thing I say to Tendi, he summited Everest 5 times. And so he knows everything there is to know, not only about Everest and summiting Everest, but every single cultural area along the way. There's thousands of peaks back there. He knows every peak. Oh, I summited this peak a few years ago. And one interesting tidbit, the Tendi, I've been hiking in my whole life. I've backpacked like part of the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail. So I've been hiking my whole life. Big Tendi actually helped me, even at my advanced age, hike better. Like, I'm kind of a bigger guy, and my hiking rhythm is kind of plodding. I just kind of clomp along the trail. He's like, Brian, if you just go a little smoother. So he actually helped me hike a little bit better and a little bit smoother. That helped me conserve energy along the way. So I thought that was fascinating. I thought I already knew how to walk, but Tendi helped me even walk a little bit better. And so that was neat. But the stories he tells, and the other guides too, because I met some of the other guides and some of the porters, and the things they know about the region, the area, the mountains, the stories, who summited when. It's just a great guy to be around for the whole, 15 days really, you're up there.
We're very lucky, one of the biggest things I think that we spend a lot of time together as a team is on staffing our trips. So we all agreed when Rugged Luxury was coming about that to really optimize this experience, you should be guided by an Everest summiteer, someone who's been up there, someone who can bring this whole valley and region and these mountains alive with their stories. And, most people who do this trek have a fascination with Everest. It's an amazing place, history, a feat of adventure. It's an incredible accomplishment. But for most of us, like I've never climbed Everest, it's not something that I'm going to be able to do. So like hearing from people like that, we felt would really enrich the experience, and getting that first-hand understanding was something that we can offer that other people can't. And as you touched on, Brian, like having that local knowledge. So whether it's Big Tendi that's guiding you, or one of our other Everest Summit guides, or Everest Summiteers, their local knowledge, having spent so long in this valley, is unparalleled. And I think the other thing is the safety element, right? Like you guys are going to 17,500 feet, 5,300 meters. That's considerable. It really has an impact on the human body. Understanding altitude illness, understanding how high altitude affects the body is critical. So a guide that understands that firsthand versus like just a normal trek person is pretty valuable. And as you said, they teach you like efficiency techniques. How do we conserve our energy? How do we walk better? You've been walking your whole life. How do we walk better? So we really spend a lot of time staffing and making sure the caliber of our guides is second to none.
Tendi did a great job too. He made every day feel like it was about us. So, part of Tendi's job is to keep us on track. Obviously, we can't be dilly-dallying all day, but like no matter what, he always made sure the day was about us and what we got to see and what he would explain to us. And so I felt that was really intimate the way he set it up, even though I know like he's got to get us, we can't just sit around all day drinking coffee, which would be wonderful. But he still made it sound like, every moment was about us and what we would learn. And so I just thought he was just a great guy. So great choice in partnering with Tendi.
So I think we're ready to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. We've been talking about what sets us apart, what our setup's like, what is rugged luxury. I know you guys really want to take a look at our actual itinerary. What are you doing day to day that, Brian's referencing? Tendi did a great job of pushing us along on our trek. We've also talked a little bit about our slower schedule and really being mindful of the trekker and the climber and what they're experiencing. So Caroline helped craft this trek itinerary. So I'm going to let her go through it and explain how it works with the rest and acclimatization days that you see kind of petered in there a little bit.
Yeah, I can't take all the credit for designing the itinerary as much as I'd like to. It's actually the same itinerary that our summit climbers use. And that is because it is all about acclimatization, right? The environment that we're in is really unique because of the altitude. So as I mentioned before, this is not a long trek, right? It's only 40 miles. It's 60 odd kilometers. So you're not doing that much distance. But because of the altitude, it takes us a long time to get there. It's like, you'll see on the schedule there, day 1, arriving Kathmandu. By day 13 is when you're arriving in Everest Base Camp. You're like, what? How does it take us 13 days to go 40 miles? 1, it's really achievable, but 2, it's all about slowing it down, right? Your body needs to make physiological changes to be able to operate in this environment in a way that you're going to be able to enjoy your experience. So we only do like 4 to 6 hours of hiking every day. It's only sort of 4 to 8 miles. And we have what Stephanie touched on, these rest and acclimatization days. So I know that the names of these towns aren't necessarily going to be relevant. We'll show you a little bit of the terrain in a minute, but you can see that on day 5, for instance, you've trekked to a place called Namche Bazaar, which is the Sherpa capital, and you have a rest and acclimatization day there. What we do on that rest and acclimatization day, it's still quite active. We will walk up on a little gentle day hike to a higher point than you're going to sleep at, and then we descend back and we spend 2 nights in a village. And that basically shocks your body. It's kind of like going to the gym and building muscle, right? So you go to the gym, you push it a little bit, and then you rest and recover. And when you come back to the gym another day, you're going to be stronger and you can push it a little bit, rest and recover, and you increase your fitness. It's the same with acclimatization. We go a little higher and we shock our bodies, and then we come back and we sleep and we allow them to adjust before we make a bigger move the next day. And that is, for us, like designing the itinerary is critical for our summit success, not only reaching the top of Everest, but also reaching Everest Base Camp in general. You'll find a lot of itineraries when you're shopping around that go pretty fast. And that might suit work a little bit. I do understand the challenge with this is a longer trip. It's hard to get the time off work. But if you're going to put your money and your time and your training and your heart into this goal, this is the time to take. You need to allow your body to make the physiological changes that it needs to make, and that takes time. We've designed it for our summit climbers to make long-term physiological changes in their body, to increase their red blood cell count, to increase lung capacity. We want all of those things to happen for you too. So the trek looks like a long time to go that distance, but like, Brian, how did you find the itinerary? Because the distance is kind of deceiving, right, to the actual challenge that you have on the ground.
It is all uphill though. I found the itinerary just perfect, and you kind of fall into this natural rhythm. And the 40 miles it is deceiving because you do the 40 miles and you go from village to village. But on the days where on the itinerary where you might see rest and acclimatization hike, that's a great day. So you get to stay 2 nights in each of the tea house. So Namche Bazaar is a great example. It's a 7 mile trek, 11K if you will, up to that area, and then you're pretty tired. It is a strenuous day. The next day you have a great night's sleep, you have a great breakfast, and they do an acclimatization hike and stay in the same tea house. So you fall into this natural rhythm where you go up in altitude, probably 2,000 feet, give or take, and then you stay at that altitude for 2 nights. And what I found for me, and for anybody out there listening, I'm close to 60 years old. So the trek is meant for all age groups. So if you're 30, more power to you. If you're 65 and worried about it, trust me, you can do it. Acclimatization hike is great. And what I found the rhythm the first night, I would have not sleep great the very first night because it's pretty strenuous going up all that altitude. And what CTSS does with the acclimatization hike, the day hike, you come back at that same altitude and sleep, and you get a great night's sleep that night. And that was kind of the rhythm I fell into, and my body got used to that. So a great breakfast, some coffee, a great hike, some amazing scenery, and then 2 nights in a certain tea house, which are wonderful. And then out on your day hike. And it really follows that rhythm, and it allows you to get to base camp and you feel really, really good by the time you get there. At least that was my experience with it.
Yeah, which is a really different experience to a lot of people. If you talk to the run-of-the-mill people that you find in the, at the bar or in the pub, and you ask them like, oh, and they say, oh yeah, I've done Everest Base Camp too. Most people will have said, oh, no, it really gave me a hiding because there's no acclimatization strategy built into those itineraries. So when you're shopping around, make sure you're looking for, how is this itinerary acclimatizing my body? How's it letting me catch up to the place and the environment that I am in so I can actually enjoy it? Like you just kind of touched on, Brian, like you kind of feel pretty like when you first get up to a new altitude high point, and you just need time to let that resolve, and then you're going to feel good again.
Yep.
But you just keep pushing through, which so many of these treks do, because they're all about like the numbers, right? It's not about the quality. They're about like pushing numbers through. So they're on speedy itineraries. It's a cattle terrain, and it just doesn't work in the Himalaya.
The in-between hike, the acclimatization hike, I always enjoyed immensely. And there's sort of like this rhythm to it. You're going to do this hike today, and it's going to be a challenging hike, but it's kind of nice knowing on that day that you're going to come back to the same tea house. All your stuff is already set up. You don't need to unpack or anything. So it's just like a low stress, easy day, and the scenery is just astounding. I mean, I don't know a better way to put it than that. It's just amazing.
Like you get to see these little hidden gems of the valley too. Like, did you go to Tamo Monastery? Like most people in Namche would never go off to Tame and see that monastery that's sitting there. It's one of the oldest Buddhist monasteries in the world. Let's do an overview and a bit of a flyover of the terrain, because I think that really helps you actually understand like why these days, how long it takes, and where you are.
The first time you showed me this, Caroline, I've actually never done this trek, but the two presenting have. Of course, my eyes just opened up. I was like, oh, it makes so much more sense. So I'll let Caroline talk you through this.
Okay, so the first thing is you fly from Kathmandu, right? So you land internationally in Kathmandu, we spend a few days there, and then you fly to that little red dot, Lukla Airport, and you actually go downhill first and hit one of these big glacial rivers to a place called Phakding. And yes, I am pronouncing that correctly. Then you kind of hug the river before you start going up a big hill to Namche Bazaar, and then down again to the glacial river and up again to Tengboche. Now we can see we're so high, we're above the vegetation layer, and you can see just how big these mountains are. We hit Ferroche, and now, in the top of the screen, you can start to see the glacial moraine of the Khumbu Glacier, and you'll see a little Lobuche base camp off to the left. We're just flying by it now. We'll talk about that. And you come up to the last town, the last outpost on the Everest Base Camp trek is called Gorak Shep. And then you hit Everest Base Camp. We're about to fly over the rock, everyone. Say wave to the spray painted rock, and there's Everest Base Camp proper. And you can just see the huge scale of the Himalaya. And that's about 40 miles. So you can see that Everest is that one with the dark triangle on the top that we're kind of flying over. It's coming into the center of the screen now. Lhotse was in the middle, Nuksi's there. And now we're looking back down the valley that you've come. You can see Lukla in the background. So that's the kind of terrain that you're coming up to. And I think that helps kind of give you the visual that that's what you're walking over. And, the main towns there in that thumbnail is where you do your main rest and acclimatization days. We hit Namche, Tengboche, Ferroche, and then we go out to Lobuche Base Camp, which we're going to touch on as well.
So folks, now that we've done the itinerary and we're really starting to understand how our trek kind of sets itself apart, we're going to break it down and go over a couple of highlights. We're going to talk about the trek up the Khumbu Valley, and then we'll break down a couple of highlights at Everest Base Camp, which there is no shortage of highlights there, especially once you get to Everest Base Camp. And then we'll talk about the return trip as well and being back in Kathmandu because we have a couple extra special rugged luxury amenities added in as well. So I think Caroline's going to walk us through some of these journey highlights about the trek and heading up the Khumbu, and Brian is making a wonderful big smile, happy face right there. That's, again,
yeah, I know. I want to hear from you, Brian, too, about what was your favorite, what was your favorite part of the trek?
There's so many. And so my absolute favorite, probably could go on forever about this, but I won't, I promise, but was after you go by the rock, you're up on this ridge line and you're looking down on Everest Base Camp. So you can see the camp in front of you, which is far more vast than you might think if you just watch some specials on TV or something. So I was surprised at the size and scope of base camp. And the even better part is up on the right, which is kind of the picture I have behind me right now. You can see Everest there. So you get this view, you're going to be staying in base camp. You've worked really hard for the last 13 days or so to get up there. You're with your hiking buddies, your trekking buddies, and your guide. And there you have this amazing view to the right of Mount Everest. And you see Everest throughout the trek and at different angles and different times. And then down below, you see base camp. And so that was really my favorite. But another big highlight was how you get started flying from Kathmandu into Lukla, which is essentially the start of your trek. And whether you do a helicopter or a small plane to get into Lukla, that is your first deep glimpse of the full array of the Himalayas and all the peaks and how incredibly vast it is and kind of how small it makes you feel. That plane ride or helicopter ride into Lukla is absolutely stunning. A million photos you're going to want to take when you're on your way there.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I think that's a problem is thank goodness for digital cameras because you take 1,000 photos of everything. It's just every day is different. I love how Everest reveals herself very slowly. You kind of have to work for the glimpses. But for me, the trek highlights as well is just as the altitude changes, so does the scenery around you. It's not the same every day. You're hitting beautiful turquoise glacial rivers roaring through these valleys. And then you go through rhododendron forests that are in full bloom at that time of the year in March. They're absolutely beautiful, March, April. And then you come out and it's like, you've come out to this like tundra almost of like, there's no vegetation, there's no more trees. And like, I don't know about you, Brian, but I remember like coming back down and seeing green again and being like, oh, the color green is so good. So, it's like, I just love how it continues to change. You're going to see some pretty cool things on the trek itself. We stop off at Tengboche Monastery, which is a really historic cultural place. There's active monastery. The monks are there. It's very cool. Most Everest summit climbers will receive a blessing from the High Lama there. The tea houses that we stay in, Namche Bazaar, What did you think of Namche Bazaar, Brian?
I was surprised at how much was at Namche Bazaar. And so my reading of it and what Tendi told me, it was just a really small farming community about 40 years ago. And now it's kind of burst into this kind of one of the last big stops on your trek to pick up gear, to get meals, snacks. And it's just a bustling little community. And one thing, I don't know if this is the right time to say it, but on the way to Namche, after you leave Luca, you pass across over a series of suspension bridges, and one of my favorites was called the Hillary Bridge. It's a 200-meter long suspension bridge, and I don't want to scare anybody away who's afraid of heights, but it's kind of a skinny bridge. It's very safe, but if you recall, everything that's at Namche Bazaar, or everything up the trail, if you will, has come up there via a llama, a porter, maybe a helicopter. But if it's a llama, a porter, or a donkey, a mule at the lower elevations, they have to cross all these bridges also. So it's really neat to see all the activity waiting to cross these bridges. And it also makes you think back when Sir Edmund Hillary went up there, he didn't have these great bridges to go over. So it really helps your trek a lot. But to get out in the middle of the suspension bridge and get some photos and some videos of it is just amazing. And that's on the way to Namche. And then once you get to Namche, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a city built into the side of a mountain, like a big bowl-shaped city that has really everything you could want. If you forgot some gear, you want some special snacks. For me, what I did, this isn't for everybody, but they lay claim to the world's highest elevation Irish pub. And so I thought, there's no way I'm going all the way to Nepal, even though I'm at 12 or 14,000 feet, and not getting just one Guinness before I head off to base camp. And so that's what I did. And I thought that was really fun. And that's all it takes is one beer at that elevation, by the way.
That's a great tip though, actually. Like Namche is your last point on the trek to grab, like go to the ATM, grab money out, grab extra snacks, grab anything from the pharmacy. It's definitely a cool place to go. I think it really brings out like knowing, as you say, crossing that suspension bridge, watching the porters carrying these huge loads, watching the yak trains. Like if you're worried about those bridges, don't worry. When you see half a ton animal walking over them and then 50 of them in a row walking over that bridge at the same time, you know the bridge is strong. Then when we get into like the mountain lodges and the tea houses, and you realize that everything that you're looking at is hand carried in, like when you now think of the finest tea houses and lodges and the comfy bed at the end of the day on a rugged luxury trek, it's pretty phenomenal, isn't it?
That's crazy to think that a yak or somebody carried these beds up or flew these, like a helicopter maybe dropped those in. I know I've seen photos of even you guys setting up camp way up there in the same fashion. And I think that's neat to connect that these tea houses are doing the exact same thing. Brian, how was your experience and how does rugged luxury kind of show up in these tea houses? Because everyone stays in tea houses, everyone stays in mountain lodges. But how did you experience our kind of elevated rugged luxury sense when you were there?
Well, having done the trip and seen the array of choices that you have in tea houses, going to Namche, just for example, there are several different lodging options there. And I felt like CTSS always put us in the top of the line tea house in that area. And it was really special what they did. Every tea house has kind of some similar things in that they have a gathering area, a kitchen, and then the rooms with showers. And every tea house we had an amazing kitchen with great food. And I can't tell anybody enough how much better it makes you feel to have a great meal at the end of the day and then a great breakfast the next morning to start your day. Just the consistent high quality food at every meal made a huge difference. The other thing, it is chilly up there, as everybody knows, is they always had a big fire. The gathering room was always nice and warm, and every room had heated blankets and hot water. And so I thought that was just amazing and far more than I expected heading out into the Khumbu Valley in Nepal. I was blown away by that, to be honest. And the service, I'm talking about the stuff, just the people and the service was just amazing. They're so excited to see you visit, and they take such great care of you. You feel really special staying there. And I enjoyed it immensely, that aspect of it.
And that's one of the biggest things is we really like hunt down through the whole valley to find the finest tea houses, the finest mountain lodges, where we can get that rugged luxury feel with a dash of comfort and the finer things in life in a really remote, tricky place at high altitude. So that's cool. One of the things that we do a little bit differently on this trek as well, compared to any other Everest Base Camp trek, is we hit Lobuche Base Camp. Now, Lobuche Base Camp is off the beaten trail. You may remember on that flyover, you kind of saw it do a big dog leg over here. Lobuche is a 6,000 meter odd peak, really quite close to Everest. It has some of the most phenomenal views of Arma de Blanc, the Everest Massif. Normal trekkers wouldn't go here, but because Lobuche Peak is part of our summit climb rotation, their acclimatization rotation, they climb this mountain as part of their itinerary. We have alpine mountain camps set up under there. So this is your first night where you actually start glamping and camping and you're out under alpine stars. And it's a really special place. Brian, you had a unique experience at Lobuche. That's him in the middle there. His guide, Tendi, his guide at the time pivoted their itinerary to go and take advantage of seeing an incredible peak called Awi Peak. Our Everest Base Camp trek is different. We do pivot off and see untouched, unexplored parts of the Khumbu Valley. And then once you get to Everest Base Camp proper, I think this is like a pretty exciting moment. You kind of come through the gates, you pass Trekkers Rock, we bring you into the official Everest Summit Camp. You are permitted to stay there as a well-wisher of the Everest team. And you stay for 2 nights on the glacier. And the whole camp is built on the glacier, which is really cool. Again, going back to that, like the little marginal gains philosophy, 1% here, 1% there. We have tripped out this base camp, right? You would have seen it in the video. We play ping pong up there. We have a barista pumping out beautiful coffees from the coffee machine. The one really cool thing is like, this is a temporary camp, right? We were literally built on a glacier. We're there for 2 months through April and May, and the entire camp is temporary, right? So everything you see in that video, the little geodesic domes that you have has been built, and you can see the Sherpa crew who go in kind of February, early March and actually hand build this camp every single year. And by the end of the Everest climbing season, everything gets pulled off. Everything gets packed back onto the yaks, pulled down, put in storage, all ready for the next year, and we leave no trace. We are really passionate about protecting the environments that we play in and the climbs, making sure where we're climbing, we keep clean. We lodge a huge garbage disposal with the Nepalese government, and we don't get that deposit back unless we leave no trace. So everything, including human waste, is carried off the glacier. Right? So what you see in these videos isn't there all the time. It's just this temporary city that is built and then taken away. And we power our camp as sustainably as we possibly can. You'll see those big solar panel arrays there, which help, generate the power to keep you warm in your toasty little personal geodesic dome where you're staying and where you're sleeping at Everest Base Camp. So when we get into Everest Base Camp proper, on our rugged luxury trek, you are glamping. Right? So most people are in the tents. You guys are in these special little geodesic domes, and they're absolutely gorgeous. They have a full-size bed in there. They're warm, they're heated. You have a heated blanket. There's carpet on the floors. There's even curtains on the windows. And they're these lovely little geodesic domes that catch all that solar energy in through those windows. You've got these beautiful views. And it's like a little nest. Brian, what did you think of the accommodation and of the digs?
I was shocked at how much you guys do up there. Just coming into base camp, the thing I can tell everybody is I was astounded at the scale and scope of base camp and what these organizations do to prepare for it. And my lodging personally, that my geodesic dome was just amazing. It had heated blankets, side table. They brought me coffee in the morning for breakfast. And so it was like you're all the way up there, and it was just an amazing experience. And for me, I can tell everybody one of the things I wasn't expecting is, base camp is built on a glacier, which is shifting and moving. So in the middle of the night, sometimes there's little cracks and noises and pops. And so at first I'm like, what's going on here? And, Tendi told me this is what happens every night. Don't worry. So I thought that was a really cool part of the experience. And one thing I can tell you, you're well acclimatized, you're in pretty good shape. And there was a little video of folks playing ping pong up there. And I did play ping pong at base camp, but playing ping pong, running around, all of a sudden I noticed I'm breathing really heavy. So I'd never breathed heavy from playing ping pong before. So I thought that was neat. And the other funny thing is they intentionally tell you to drink a ton of water up there, which is smart. The whole trek, drink as much water as you can. You want to avoid headaches. You want to stay hydrated. But of course, when you drink a lot of water at 3 a.m, you have to get up and go pee. And so you have to jet across camp when it's really cold out, away across the bathroom and back. And even that, like if you run too fast, you get a little bit winded. So you're at base camp. But it was a wonderful experience. And I remember my very first meal at base camp. They had pan-seared chicken for dinner that night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And they get all the food up there via helicopter or yaks or porters. And they have a great chef. And they let you kind of tour the food tent, how well stocked they are. And so the meals are amazing. And there's a barista for the coffee, and the views is the best of all. You wake up in the morning and you look out and you're just surrounded and you're by the mountains and the ice fall and the glacier. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, the chef's pretty good. This year she's coming all the way from Chamonix.
You're
Special.
making me hungry.
Yeah,
A French
exactly.
chef is enough to sell it right there. Woo!
Yeah, it's so important to stay well energized, well fed, well rested, well hydrated, because that is what allows you to do fun things, right? So, like, one of the funnest things that we do at Everest Base Camp is an ice climbing clinic. So, we use our facilities, we go out onto the glacier just a little way from camp. We rig up a safe area for you to actually practice what it would be to be an Everest climber. Clip into the crampons, grab the ice axes, grab the ascenders, rappel from these little like vertical walls of ice. It's in a very safe place on the glacier. It's not in the Khumbu Icefall. It's a safe place just outside of camp, but you still get these incredible views and you get vertical. And I tell you what, when you are trying to ice climb vertically, like let alone leaving your tent to pee or play ping pong, making you breathless, it gives you this incredible taste of just what a feat climbing Everest is. It gives you perspective on what it takes to climb Everest when it's this hard to climb a, 20-foot vertical ice wall. It's just a really good like check-in, but it's also really fun to like be what it is to be an Everest climber for the day and like try something new. It's beginner friendly, it's opt-in, you don't have to do it. The guides will be with you. It's not very far away. The equipment is there, so you don't have to bring anything special, but it is a real highlight for most people if they're feeling up for it to get out there and do some mountaineering and do some climbing.
I participated in that. I enjoyed that. I learned a lot. It's if you've ever just watched people on crampons walking in the ice, they make it look so easy. Tendi and our guides that day, they just, off they go. But I was new to it. So it was much more difficult than I thought it would be, but they were great instructors and I'm glad I got to do it that day. So I got a ton of photos doing that. And by the end of it, you start to get the hang of it. Like everything up at the high altitude, there's a rhythm to it. You can't be too rushed. You have to take your time. You have to be very intentional about your steps and where you put your feet and, every move that you make. And then once you get the hang of that, it gets a little bit easier, but it was really neat. I enjoyed that. So that was a fun day activity. But everything at altitude, at that high altitude, is a bit more labored for sure. So you got to take your time, you got to be patient, and let it kind of come to you.
Yeah, awesome. And then I think that the biggest highlight of the whole trek is what comes next, right? So you've spent 2 days in your beautiful little geodesic domes, eating good food from the chef and exploring base camp and doing some ice climbing. And then instead of going back like everybody else does and retracing your steps, a helicopter, a high altitude specialized helicopter with a high altitude pilot lands on the glacier just outside of camp on the helipads, picks you up and takes you all the way back to Kathmandu. And it's a very cool experience to see what you've walked from a bird's eye perspective and just know that you are just going straight back into civilization and you don't even have to work for it. It's like you've achieved your goal and now you get a really
Yeah.
lovely ride all the way back to town. That's a really special thing. And just knowing like, a lot goes into that, right? The weight loads and the pilots and their ratings and flying in that thin air and how they do it is just an experience in itself. I would argue it's the most scenic helicopter flight anywhere in the world. You'll never get a view of the Himalaya like you do through the windows of that helicopter.
Brian, you look
Yeah,
pretty
that was
happy to be on that flight right there.
yeah, that's me.
Were you eager to
Yeah.
hike down or were you happy to catch the ride?
I was very happy to catch the helicopter ride back. And if I did have to hike back down, I certainly would have done it and I would have enjoyed the hike back down, absolutely. But just walk to the helipad and be able to fly above. I mean, it's just a whole nother experience to go through the valley on a helicopter and retrace your steps, like you said. So I thought that was really, really cool. And I thought that was super exciting to be able to do that. So huge thumbs up to the crew on that. So, like I said, if I had to go back down, I absolutely would have, and so many people do. But to be able to fly through the valley all the way back to the airport in Kathmandu in one fell swoop after your trek, it's great. Not everybody has months to do trips, so it also compresses your timeline a little bit. Maybe you can't get 5 weeks of vacation from work to do the trek. So the trek down is faster than the trek up for sure, but still it's more and more days and more time if you're
Yeah.
still working out of the office. So, there's a kind of a common sense element to it too. You can compress your travel days just a little bit, but the experience was amazing.
Yeah, it saves like 3 or 4 days. So that's great. And then when we hit Kathmandu, now it's time to rest and rejuvenate, right? So we go and we stay in a five-star hotel. We do a massage down there. We do a full day city tour, seeing the UNESCO World Heritage sites in a really vibrant, really cool city. We have this beautiful degustation dinner and one of the finest restaurants in Kathmandu. And we just kind of closed the trip in a real highlight, but it's all about rest and rejuvenation before you head back home. But just remember, like Kathmandu as a city is probably one of the most unique cities in the world. It's a bustling hub, it's very vibrant, but it has really deep history and culture and some really amazing UNESCO sites. So look forward to that cultural day tour. On the Rugged Luxury Trek, you obviously go into Everest Base Camp proper. You stay in the nicest tea houses and lodges that are available in the area. You know, you're drinking cappuccinos, you're playing ping pong, you're doing an ice climbing clinic. Those are things that are on all of our Everest Base Camp treks. They're not on other people's treks. And then for you guys to be guided by an Everest Summit guide, this is the rugged luxury difference. To be in 5-star accommodations the whole way, to have the heated geodesic dome, personal geodesic domes at base camp rather than just being in a normal tent, to do the helicopter flight back out, to do the city tour, all of that are the little touches that make it a rugged luxury experience. I want to cover off as well, like just busting through some of the common questions that we get asked back here in the back office around, you know, training, gear, altitude illness and stuff like that, which I think is kind of most people's sometimes a barrier to entry, like, oh, I don't know what to get, how much gear do I need, all of that, how much training do I need to do? And I think Brian touched on it a little bit, but like training, look, anyone who is relatively fit and healthy and willing to put in the work to get there can do this. I usually suggest starting to train 3 to 6 months before you go in earnest. The more training and commitment you put in before your adventure and your expedition, the more you'll get out of the trip itself because you'll be able to enjoy it rather than just catching your breath all the time. You should comfortably be able to do 8 to 10 miles in a day. And when you are training, try to focus on getting outside and doing walks and hikes in nature, in the world, right? Because yes, you can hit the gym and there's always a place for that. But if we're hitting the stair stepper all the time in the gym, one, we're not descending, which there is descent on this trek. You go up mountains, back down to the river, cross the river, back up mountains, down to the river, up. And that descent can put lots of pressure on our knees and our joints. And also the uneven terrain that we find out on the trail is very different to what we find on the treadmill, right? You need uneven terrain to train small, like stabilizing muscles in your ankles and make sure that you're in good shape. So the best kind of training you can do is simulate what you're going to be doing on the ground when you're in Nepal, which is getting out, doing day hikes. You know, for a couple of weekends before you're about to leave, you want to try and do back-to-back weekends. So 2 days on the weekend, do a day hike 4 to 6 hours one day, and then do another day hike the next day to back it up, to show our body like, hey, we did this big day yesterday, but guess what? You got another one today. And that can be trained for really efficiently, right? So just getting out and walking, hiking. It is not about smashing it out at the gym, getting super, super hyper fit with all this muscle mass. Remember, every bit of muscle that you put on, right? If you're doing massive strength training or, you know, some of those workouts that we see gym junkies loving, they put on muscle. That muscle needs to be energized, it needs to be oxygenated, and it needs to be carried at that altitude. So you really want to focus on low intensity and long duration kind of training. That's going to put you in the best shape of your life, but it's also going to give you opportunity to get out there. I find training to be one of the hardest psychological barriers. I hate it. I feel like it's a chore unless I like invite friends to go on day hikes and I listen to a great podcast and I'm not doing it for training's sake. I try to make experiences out of it. So if you're a bit like me, that might be a great excuse to do a weekend away in a place around you. You don't have to worry about doing pre-altitude acclimatization training. You are going to do that naturally on the trail with the schedule. Gear, look, we provide you a gear list. The team in the office are amazing. Danny in particular, our program manager for the Himalaya, is a gear junkie. She's fantastic. We will give you a gear list, but do not underestimate the cold, right? You need a good quality puffy jacket. It is cold here. We are on Everest. We're on a glacier. You know, you want good boots, good ankle support. You want to wear them in. They're going to be your ally every single day, right, Brian? Like, how much do you love your shoes?
Got to have good boots. For me, that was my most important piece of gear was my boots. My feet, they never let me down. They were great boots. I'd worn them leading up to the trek. I mean, everybody gets like different levels of cold. And so I'm not traditionally a cold person, but I had a great, puffy jacket and good blankets. And so I never really got cold up there, but it is indeed cold. And if you're kind of a cold sleeper, there's those types of folks, you want to make sure that you're absolutely ready for that. And then the only other thing to add on Carolyn's, for me at least, on training is just train your body so that there's like resilience and recovery, because she mentioned this, you're going to do it every day. You're going to have a great day of trekking, which is and a great meal and a good night's sleep, and then you're going to do it again. So you just train yourself in a way that allows your body to get up and do it again over and over and over again. For me, that was the key. And like I said, I'm on the older side, so that's what I did, and it worked out just fine.
Amazing. My most like precious piece of gear is those trekking poles. I call them my nano poles. Like honestly, like doesn't matter how old you are and how fit you are, having a pair of those trekking poles to stabilize you on uneven terrain, big steps up, big steps down, just golden. Don't forget them. They're really great.
Candy actually told me on those trekking poles, they actually take roughly 25% of the load off your knees. And so you're offsetting, if you weigh like I do a lot, that's a quarter of your body weight off your knees on a 6-hour trek. So they're actually quite scientifically proven to be quite helpful.
And then I guess the other biggest thing that we get that I wanted to dive into quickly today for you guys is altitude illness. It's one of the biggest concerns and often reasons why people don't want to sign up for it. But let's like talk through it quickly so you guys feel a bit more comfortable. Altitude sickness is also known as AMS, acute mountain sickness. And it happens when our bodies are exposed to rarefied air, so thinner air and less oxygen, less atmospheric pressure. And if you move up too quickly in altitude, your body's just don't have time to adjust and you get sick. And when you return to a lower altitude, your symptoms will likely dissipate. Typically, people start to feel altitude illness around 2,000 meters is where it starts to click in, about 6,500 feet. But it's really, really subjective and it's not a well-studied area, right? So, and people respond in different ways and they can respond differently at different phases and times of their life. You might respond really well at altitude 1 trek, which generally it will be a good sign for future treks. But sometimes if your body is not feeling great, it will bring on and exacerbate altitude symptoms. So we want to be careful with it. Some people never notice altitude at all. Like you see those people that climb Everest without oxygen, they're totally fine and they don't even notice it. And some people really feel it. I'm one of those people that really feel it. The best thing is you just need to give your body time. Your body will make the changes. It is an incredible machine that will make the changes. AMS symptoms, so altitude sickness symptoms, feel a little bit like being hungover, right? Like you feel you've got a bit of a headache. It's hard to sleep. That's a really big one. You'll lose your appetite. Like you just don't feel like eating. You'll feel a little bit fatigued. And then that's kind of like a mild AMS, right? So the headache, mild headache, a little bit of like, I just feel a bit hungover, but it doesn't necessarily interfere with your normal activity. That's like mild AMS. And that's very normal and very expected. Most people will experience that without a doubt on this trek, but it dissipates quite quickly as your body goes, whoa, we need to increase respiration rate. We need to increase blood pressure here. We need to do something. Moderate AMS, as it starts to get a little bit more serious, is where your symptoms start to interfere with your activities. This is where you may experience like a really severe headache, or nausea and vomiting and difficulty with coordination. Like if you start to find yourself not very coordinated, then you need to descend to start feeling better, right? And then there's severe AMS. Now, severe AMS is an emergency. This is a medical issue. We need to descend. It's where you can't catch a breath even when you're sitting down resting. It's like a suffocating feeling. You don't have any coordination. There's fluid buildup in the lungs or on the brain. This is a medical emergency. We need to descend. But as you can see, it's a spectrum, right? So we start from mild to moderate to severe. And generally speaking, we'll get signs and symptoms as we go along this scale before we get to red light emergency, right? So most people, and that's why we rest and acclimatize before we go up again, right? Before we stress the body and go up again. And most people, their symptoms will dissipate as if we acclimatize properly. How do we prevent this happening? Is we take a nice slow schedule, which we've talked about. We do that climb high on the acclimatization days and descend to sleep. Your body actually makes the physiological changes when you sleep. Stay hydrated. Your guides will be on you about drinking water. One, because the air is thin and doesn't have water in it. It's very, very dry up there. So your body needs it. You need to be drinking 3 to 4 liters of water a day. But there is also a correlation between being dehydrated, having a calorie deficiency, and AMS being worse. Avoid smoking. heavy alcohol, heavy coffee use. And the diet that we'll be eating in the Himalaya is perfect for helping prevent and helping your body adjust. When eating a carb heavy, high calorie diet, this is not the place to lose weight, team. I know it's like, yeah, I'm going off and it'd be a great excuse. I'll lose a couple of pounds. And you probably will lose that couple of pounds, but make sure that you're spoiling yourself and you're eating loads of great food as you go. If there's any time that your body needs the calories, it's now. And then the biggest one is to talk to your doctor before you go about Diamox. Medication like Diamox are an amazing, useful tool if your body can handle taking it. It's a pretty mild medication. It helps increase respiration rate and it just helps your body make that adjustment, gives it a little shortcut. So have a chat to your doctor about that.
I can speak to the food I did. I felt free to eat delicious meals the whole time I was there, and I was very well fed, and I still dropped about 6 to 8 pounds. So it was like the best of both worlds. I ate as much as I possibly could, and it was delicious, and I still dropped a couple of pounds. Double thumbs up on that.
Yeah. And then, like, my golden rules around this is if you learn the early symptoms of altitude illness, like we've just touched on them, and you're willing to just be self-aware and then communicate. No one can read your body and no one can read your mind. And you might feel like you don't want to be the slowest member of the team or kind of that person that's like, something's not right here. But you need to communicate with your guides. They are going to help understand where we are on that scale of AMS. And if this is something that's going to dissipate, if it's going to be okay here, or if this is something that we need to take more seriously. Because it is a serious thing, but we generally get plenty of time from where it like starts to niggle at us to where it's a serious medical emergency. And of course, we have plans in place for if it did become a medical emergency and it presented like that. Yeah, we've got contingency plans. We're happy to go through them with you. You never want to ascend to sleep at a higher altitude. If you don't communicate with your guide and they don't know that you've got any of this going on, and you just go, oh, but I don't want to like miss out on my trek and I will need to keep going up, and you ascend at a higher altitude with moderate symptoms of AMS, you're in the hurt locker. This is not a good plan. So never ascend to sleep at a higher altitude with symptoms that are more than your guide says, oh no, that a very mild headache, feeling a little bit like, I feel a bit hungover is normal. Okay. It's the stuff where like all of a sudden, I'm not drinking water properly. I poured half of it down my, I'm uncoordinated or I can't catch my breath even when I'm sitting down and it's now been 5 to 10 minutes. So, and then descend. And our guides will help you do this. We're going to descend. If your symptoms are getting worse and you're at the same altitude and you haven't moved and they keep progressing, we're going down. So they're the golden rules. If you abide by them, you'll be fine. Again, remember that itinerary is designed so that this doesn't happen.
I just want to add in, folks, if you are interested in learning more about training, because we did a quick overview on that, if you're interested in learning about acclimatization, what that spectrum really looks like and the principles behind it, or even how to fuel yourself, we're going to talk more about self-care and fueling in just a moment. We've done webinars with specialists who specialize in acclimatization, in training, Mark Postal and Lisa Thompson, incredible humans. And then we worked with our nutritionist, Rebecca Dent, on all the nutrition webinar stuff. So those are resources. They're on our YouTube channel. And if you're like, I need a deep dive into training because I'm most scared about that, watch that.
Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you. Because we did recently do a great one on acclimatization with a doctor. And yeah, go check that out if you get the chance. It doesn't matter whether you're going to the summit of Mount Everest or you are trekking to Everest Base Camp. The number one reason that people don't attain their goal, I don't like really using the word failure, but they don't get to where they were hoping to get to in the mountains, is not their technical ability, their lack of experience. It's none of that. It's because they fail to take care of themselves. It's self-care. And this is seriously basic, but it's hard to do sometimes, because what I mean by self-care is getting out ahead of your body's needs in this environment. That means we're drinking before we're dehydrated. We're always staying just on top, right? We're always topping ourselves up. We are continually snacking so that we never go into a calorie deficit. It is much harder for your body in this environment to bring itself back to homeostasis than it is to maintain homeostasis, right? So we just want to be constantly dropping in with water, dropping in with food. Oh, I'm going to stop for a rest break now. I'm not cold yet, but I know I'm stopping for a rest break. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my puffy jacket on as I sit down, and then I'm going to drink and eat so that my body never gets cold. Hey, I'm starting to feel like I'm moving. I'm generating warmth. I'm going to delayer now before I get hot and sweaty and expend all that energy and then, have to try and cool my body down. You need to be very proactive versus reactive. That is a golden rule in the mountains. And it doesn't matter if you're climbing Mount Everest and summiting or you're going to Everest Base Camp, it is about staying ahead of your body. So get in training, train with snacks. Train with hydration strategies. Train to go, wow, I need to know my layering, and try to maintain this comfort level in your body. And notice when you dip out of it and go, what are the things that happened just before I started to like really feel the fatigue, or I really started to feel this, that I could kind of prevent. And then when you're actually on the trail, you will be taking care of yourself. The guides will be on you a little bit about it too. But like, don't not drink because your water bottle is too far down in your backpack. Have a system so that your water bottle is in handy use, because hydration is really important. Food is really important. Food is one of the biggest things on the Everest Base Camp Trail. Altitude affects appetite. You will not feel that hungry, and your body is expending a huge amount of energy. So it's kind of counterintuitive, because you need to be throwing energy into your machine, but you're not feeling it, right? So we will tell you to bring snacks from home that really tempt you. This is the time to spend the dosh, to bring the things that you otherwise wouldn't buy for yourself and really treat yourself. This is the stuff where if I put down a bowl of this particular snack and you just had Thanksgiving dinner, you would still eat a little bit of it because you love it so much. This is the time. So tempt yourself with stuff like we provide. And, you know, there's great food in the Khumbu. It's simple, it's carbohydrate rich, it's organic, it's grown in the area, it's sustainable, it's all of that. But everyone has really individual taste. And I don't know what tempts you after you've just eaten Thanksgiving dinner. So please bring it with you. Right? Because you just need to be topping yourself up all the time. Those hydration tabs that make your water more palatable, do it. You know, help with the electrolytes, particularly if you're a sweaty person, definitely bring in those electrolyte tabs, drop them in your water bottles. It's stuff like that. Keep your energy levels high. Don't bonk, don't hit the wall, take lots of sips of water, and you will find yourself able to enjoy this experience so much more, and you will be safe and successful as you do it. So that's probably my biggest tip. Whatever your ambitions are in the mountain, is self-care and being proactive with that self-care versus reactive. And our team can really help you and guide you.
So Caroline, I'll let you recap our philosophy one more time before we wrap up.
Yeah, and I think we've really touched on all of this anyway. Like, we're just a bit of a different expedition company, and that we're very holistic, and we really care about you having a great experience and doing it in good style, being safe, being successful. That they are our top guiding principles. They are our North Star in this business. Safety first and then success in that order. And it doesn't matter if we're looking at, you know, an Everest summit in the middle of Antarctica, or a base camp trek, or a Kilimanjaro product, or any of them. Like, everybody is different, and we treat everyone as an individual, and that is our North Star, is your safety and then your success. We are really good at being holistic, right? So we're good progression specialists. Like, if you come to us and you're like, you know what, I've never done anything before, I'd like to start with an Everest Base Camp trek, but actually my deep goal is to summit Everest, we will help get you there. We have that conversation every single day. It's our favorite conversation to have. We have a marginal gains philosophy I talked about earlier. It's basically that we throw resources at making you feel good so that you can be well rested, well fed, happy and healthy, and you're going to perform your best. That means good food, good sleep, rugged luxuries wherever we can find them in really remote, tricky places. We do have something there called the no dickheads policy. That comes from the New Zealand All Blacks. We understand that these expeditions are challenging, and the people around you can be the difference between having a phenomenal time, a phenomenal team, an encouraging experience, or not. And we are not interested in not. We are only interested in great people. We have got fortunate to have come to a place in our business where we can turn down people that we don't feel like will hit the character or the behavioral code of conduct. We expect a high degree of behavior. We expect a high degree of teamwork. We expect people to be nice. And if you are a dickhead, you will get thrown out. And it's as simple as that. It's all about the team and everyone's experience together. And when we breed that culture, it is awesome. You will meet the guides and you'll be like, these are the most phenomenal people I've ever been around. You will meet your fellow climbers and you'll know that they have your back because it is expected. Just remember that. It can be kind of harsh. People sometimes find it a bit offensive, but it is what it is. And it's an amazing difference that culture creates. So we also are pretty holistic. So if you need advice about gear, training, any of that, any questions you have, you're free to ask them. We're interested in supporting you along your whole journey. You can connect with us pretty easily. You can find us anywhere, Instagram, Facebook, our website. You can email us, info@ You can find us, Stephanie at Caroline at, you'll find us. If you want to book in and talk about your goals, then you're welcome to jump on that Calendly link. It's in the bottom of my signature email as well. If you want to have a gear consultation with our in-house expert and our program manager for the Himalaya, Danny, you're welcome to do that too. We really want you to feel free to talk to us. No question is a stupid question. We are really good at replying. And we really want to have that conversation. We want to hear about your dreams and goals. We want to make them happen. You're an individual. We want to see how we can help you do that. So that's our spiel. That's how you connect with us. Brian, have you got anything that you wish you'd known, that it was a question that would have been burning for you, that, or any final thoughts?
I was always, like probably a lot of the folks in the audience, I was always a little bit concerned about how I do up at the high altitudes, but that wasn't something that you could answer for me. It was just a personal challenge. And like in the back of my head, a little bit of a concern. And then once I started out on the trek and seeing how each day went and how the schedule worked and the rhythm, it answered my question and everything went really, really well. Because that was really my only concern heading into it. Just am I going to be okay at 17,000 feet? And it turned out that was fine. So, and it's because of the way you guys set it up. But other than that, I mean, you laid out the gear list, the travel schedule, the itinerary, everything for me well in advance. So there were no surprises on the negative side, only surprises on the positive side about how amazing it was.
That's so sweet. Thank you. Yeah, hit our website. We would be happy to plan your dream for you and be there when your life gets changed on an Everest Base Camp journey.
Awesome. Folks, I think we're wrapping it up. And I just wanted to make sure I shared the dates for 2025. So those two trek dates for 2025 have space left open. And then Caroline, which one is the date that we do each year?
Annually, we do the 28th of
Okay,
March,
thank you.
14th of April, but honestly, it will be, every year at around the same time. Our Rugged Luxury crew are the first team into our camp. They have exclusive use of our amenities. So that is really special. So it will always be in the end of March, the very, very beginning of the Everest season. And that's when all the rhododendrons are blooming. It's a really beautiful time to be in the valley. It's just starting to get a little bit warmer, but we've got those beautiful crisp days. It's the perfect time of the year. One question I do get asked is, do you run it at other times of the year? And the answer to that question is no, we don't. We only run it in this time of the year because that is when Everest Base Camp is set up for the Everest Summit climb. So you can do an Everest Base Camp trek, a custom Everest Base Camp trek any time of year with us, but you won't go to Everest Base Camp proper. And there's a lot of advantage of being kind of front row to an Everest expedition, seeing where it all takes place, coming to Everest Base Camp proper. It really heightens the experience. So if you're planning this, put it in your mind that end of March, April is when I'm going.
So folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Brian, I just want to say a quick thank you for being with us today and sharing your insights and just giving us all the excitement of what you experienced with Tindy and the Khumbu at base camp and all that you've done. We really appreciate. And then, of course, Caroline, thank you for having just such an incredible company. And thank you for designing this trek. You and Mike did it. You guys brought this to light, and we just get to celebrate in doing this trek together. So I just want to say thank you for being here today also and joining us. Any final thoughts, Caroline and Brian, as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, it's truly a bucket list trip. And
Yeah.
so I think for any adventure travelers, when you're going to list the top 5 things that you want to do, trek to Everest Base Camp has got to be on your top 5 list. And I found it to be an amazing experience and an amazing adventure, and I highly recommend it.
All right, folks, wherever you are, I hope you're having a good afternoon, maybe morning, maybe evening. Thank you all for coming today, and we will hopefully see you soon in the Khumbu. All right, everyone. Bye.
Bye.